In the quiet of the evening, where shadows softly play, a fairy tale wolf sheds his skin, gently drifting away, with a twinkle in his eye and a heart full of dreams. He waits for the Friday night glow, where the magic redeems. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. He picks up a book, the pages worn and wise, every line a whisper under the vast skies, from far off lands where the wild things roam, to enchanted forests where the heart finds home. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. With every word he reads, he casts a spell of peace, transporting all who listen to a land where joy won't cease. For in these fairy tales, amidst the laughter and tears, the wolf finds his solace, he conquers his fears. As the night grows deeper, he serenades the moon with melodies that linger, a soft and soothing tune. In this sacred hour, where magic abounds, the fairy tale wolf writes love into sound. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. So if you hear a whisper beneath the silver skies, know it's the fairy tale wolf letting his heart rise.
Hello, everyone. I'd say you did get second farm. Oh, college basketball? Okay, well. Congrats, Crimson, on getting first. Congrats, Darth, on getting second. And congrats, Guilty, on getting third. So, how's everyone doing tonight? Strength music could have started right at the beginning this time. I have to admit, I was doing a sound test on my test stream at the very opening. You know, just to see if people can hear it. I can hear it. It's probably the lowest tone I can hear. I don't know, can anyone else hear this? See, that doesn't even register on OBS, but I can hear it. So, wolf ears. Oh, gonna solo TRPG? Sounds fun. It's definitely been a day. And what was the first thing almost everyone heard this morning? I don't know if Guilty heard it, but Chuck Norris died. Not sure how much news that would get in Japan. But yeah. But anyway, on brighter news, it's Friday, and we've got fairy tales. I wish you could say it's something about your March Madness bracket. Yeah, sure we all do. I don't have one, because I don't really follow most sports anyway. There is an execute in chat. So what kind of game are you doing for the TTRPG, Crimson? But anyway, ouch. A long week. Probably glad it's over. Got my bottle of blood orange juice on my table. We're doing the Lilac Fairy book, so more fairy tales. I think we are a little over halfway through the book. Let's see, the first story is going to be Rich Brother and Poor Brother, which has many other ones. Ooh, a sci-fi one? Have you seen the GURPS series? They do a lot of random sci-fi you can mix into other stories. I think 16 stories in this book. think one of the GURPS books I got was for B movie sci-fi. So it's the really weird nuclear age horror movies. So it's got some interesting ones in there. Like it's got the stats for giant ants, giant spiders, mutant monsters. Pretty much they could have used it to make Fallout. But I think most of the GURPS books can use with at least third edition D&D. I don't see my book. Ouch. Oh, good. The microphone's not picking up the fan. It's already getting hot down here. Iron Sworn Starforged. I think I've seen some of that one. Salvage Union, I'm not sure. Of course, anytime drive-through has a sale, I just go through and find everything I can that's free. Okay, mecha game. That would make sense. Sorry, having the fan blowing does kind of make me a little sleepy. It is 9:12, so about time to get into the stories. So, everyone, feel free to settle back, get comfy, and we will read some fairy tales. And it's kind of strange. This one says it's derived from a Portuguese story. But if it's a story I think it is, I know it. I never thought about it being a Portuguese story. This version is from Portuguese. Hey, Squall. Welcome in. It's likely paper Darth. No, they could have made a video game for it. You never know anymore. But our first story for the night: The Rich Brother and the Poor Brother. There was once an old rich man who had two sons, and as his wife was dead, the elder lived with him and helped him to look after his property. For a long time all went well. The young man got up very early in the morning and worked all day, and at the end of every week his father counted up the money they had made and rubbed his hands with delight as he saw how big the pile of gold in the strong iron chest was becoming. "It will soon be full now, and I shall have to buy a larger one," he said to himself. And so busy was he that he thought of his money, and that he did not notice how bright his son's face had grown, nor had he sometimes started when he was spoken to, as if his mind was far away. One day, however, the old man went to the city on business, which he had not done for 3 years at least. It was market day, and he met many people he knew, and it was getting quite late when he turned into the inn-yard, and bade the ostler saddle his horse, and bring it round directly. While he was waiting in the hall, the landlady came up for gossip. After a few remarks about the weather and the vineyards, and she asked him how he liked his new daughter-in-law, and whether he had been surprised at the marriage. The old man started at her as he listened at her. "Daughter-in-law? Marriage?" he said. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've got no daughter-in-law, and nobody's been married lately that I ever heard of." Now this is exactly what the landlady, who was very curious, wanted to find out. But she put on a look of great alarm and exclaimed, "Oh dear! I hope you have not made mischief. I had no idea, or, of course, I would not have spoken, but—" And here she stopped and fumbled with her apron, as if she were greatly embarrassed. "As you have said so much, you will have to say a little more," retorted the old man, a suspicion of what she meant darting across him, and the woman, nothing loth, answered as before. It was not all for buying or selling that your handsome son has been coming to town every week these many months, and not the shortest way either. No, it was over the river he rode, and across the hill, and past the cottage of Miguel, the vine-keeper, whose daughter, they say, is the prettiest girl in the whole countryside, though she is too white for my taste." And then the landlady paused again, and glanced up to the farmer, to see how he was taking it. She did not learn much. He was looking straight before him, his teeth set. But as she ceased to talk, he said quietly, "Go on." "There is not much more to tell," replied the landlady, for she suddenly remembered that she must prepare supper for the hungry men who always stopped at the inn on market days, before starting for home. "But one fine morning they both went to the little church on top of the hill and were married. My cousin is servant to the priest, and she found out about it and told me. But good day to you, sir. Here's your horse, and I must hurry off to the kitchen." It was lucky that the horse was sure-footed and near the road, for his bridle hung loose on his neck, and his master took no heed of the way he was going. When the farmhouse was reached, the man led an animal to the stable, and then went to look for his son. "I know everything. You have deceived me. Get out of my sight at once. I have done with you," he stammered, choking with passion. He came up to the young man, who was cutting a stick in front of the door, whistling gaily the while. "But, father—" "You are no son of mine. I only have one now. Begone, or it will be the worse for you." And as he spoke, he lifted up his whip. The young man shrank back. He feared lest his father should fall down in a fit. His face was so red, and his eyes seemed busting from his head. But it was no use staying. Perhaps next morning the old man might listen to reason, though in his heart the son felt that he would never take back his words. So he turned slowly away and walked heavily along the path, which ended in a cave on the side of a hill, and there he sat through the night, thinking of what had happened. Yes, he had been wrong, there was no doubt of that, and he did not quite know how it had come about. He had meant to have told his father all about it. He was sure, quite sure, that if once the old man had seen his wife, he would have forgiven her poverty on account of her great beauty and goodness. But he had put it off from one day to a day, hoping always for a better opportunity. And now, this was the end. But the son had no sleep that night, no more had the father. And as soon as the sun rose, he sent a messenger to the great city with orders to bring back the younger brother. When he arrived, the farmer did not waste words, but informed him that he is now his only heir, and would inherit all his lands and money, so that he had come to live at home and to help him manage the property. Though very pleased at the thought of becoming a rich man, for the brothers had never cared much for each other, the younger would have rather stayed where he was, for he soon got tired of the country and longed for a town life. However, this he kept to himself and made the best of things, working hard like his brother before him. In this way the years went on, but the crops were not so good as they had been, and the old man gave orders that some fine houses he was building in the city should be left unfinished, for it would take all his savings to complete them. As to the older son, he would never even hear his name mentioned, and died at last without ever seeing his face, leaving to the younger, as he had promised, all his lands, as well as all his money. Meanwhile, the son whom he had disinherited had grown poorer and poorer. He and his wife were always looking out for something to do, and never spent a penny that they could help, but luck was against them, and at the time of the father's death they had hardly bread to eat or clothes to cover them. If there had only been himself, he would have managed to get on somehow, but he could not bear to watch his children becoming weaker day by day, and swallowing his pride, at length he crossed the mountain to the old home where his brother was now living. It was the first time for a long that the two men had come face to face, and they looked at each other in silence. Then tears rolled up in the eyes of the elder, but twinkling in a hastily way, he said, "Brother, it's not needed that I should tell you how poor I am. You can see that for yourself. I have not come to beg for money, but only to ask if you will give me some unfinished houses of yours in the city, and I will make them watertight, so that my wife and children can live in them, and that will save our rent. As they are, they profit you nothing." The younger brother listened and pitied him, and gave him the houses that he asked for, and the elder went away happy. For some years things went on as they were, and then the rich brother began to feel lonely, and thought to himself that he was getting older, and it was time for him to get married. The wife he chose was very wealthy, but she was also very greedy, and however much she had, she always wanted more. She was, besides, one of those unfortunate people who invariably fancy that the possessions of other people must be better than their own. Many a time her poor husband regretted the day that he had first seen her, and often her meanness and shabby ways put him to shame. But he was not the courage to rule her, and she only got worse and worse. After she had been married a few months, the bride wanted to go into the city and buy herself some new dresses. She had never been there before, and when she had finished her shopping, she thought she would pay a visit to her unknown sister-in-law and rest a bit. The house she was seeking was in a broad street, and ought to have been very magnificent, but some carved stone portico enclosed to mean a little door of rough wood, while a row of beautiful pillars led to nothing. The dwellings on each side were in the same unfinished condition, and water trickled down the walls. Most people would have considered it a wretched place and turned their backs on it as soon as they could. But this lady saw that by spending some money the houses could be made splendid as they were originally intended to be, and she instantly resolved to get them for herself. Full of this idea, she walked up a marble staircase and entered the little room where her sister-in-law sat making clothes for her children. The bride seemed full of interest in the houses and asked a great many questions about them, so that her new relations liked her much better than they expected, and hoped they might be good friends. However, as soon as she reached home, she went straight to her husband and told him that he must get those houses back from his brother, as they would exactly suit her, and she could easily make them into a palace as fine as the king's. But her husband only told her that she might buy houses in some other part of town, for she could not have those, as he had long since made a gift of them to his brother, who had lived there for many years. At this answer the wife grew very angry. She began to cry and make such a noise that all the neighbors heard her, and put their heads out the window to see what was the matter. "It is absurd," she cried out. "Quite unjust. Indeed, if you came to think of it, a gift was worth nothing, and as her husband made it as he was a bachelor, and since then he has been married, and has never given her consent to any such thing." And so she lamented all day and all night, till the poor man was nearly worried to death, and at last he did what she wanted, and summoned his brother in a court of law, and to give up the houses which, he said, had only been lent to him. But when the evidence on both sides had been heard, the judge decided in favor of the poor man, which made the rich lady more furious than ever, and she demanded not to rest until she gained the day. If the judge would not give her the houses, another should, and so time after time the case was tried over again, till at last it came before the highest judge of all, in the city of Evora. Her husband was heartily tired and ashamed of the whole affair, but his weakness in not putting a stop to it at the beginning got him into this difficulty, and now he was forced to go on. On the same day the two brothers set out on their journey to the city, the rich one on horseback, with plenty of food in his knapsack, the poor one on foot, with nothing but a piece of bread, and 4 onions to eat on the way. The road was hilly, and neither could go very fast, and when night fell, they were both glad to see some lights in a window in a little distance in front of them. The lights turned out to be placed there by a farmer, who had planned to have a particularly good supper, as it was his wife's birthday, and bade the rich man enter and sit down, while he himself took the horse to the stable. The poor man asked timidly if he might spend the night in a corner, adding that he brought his own supper with him. Another time permission might have been refused him, for the farmer was no lover of humble folk. "Hey, guilty. Hey, Matsu." But now he gave the elder brother leave to come in, pointing out a wooden chair where he could sit. Supper was soon served, and very glad the younger brother was to eat it, for his long ride had made him very hungry. The farmer's wife, however, would touch nothing, and at last declared that the only supper she wanted was one of the onions the poor man was cooking in the fire. Of course, he gave it to her, though he would gladly have eaten it himself, as 3 onions are not much at the end of a long day's walk. And soon after they all went to sleep, the poor man making himself as comfortable as he could in his corner. A few hours later, the farmer was aroused by the cries and groans of his wife. "Oh, I feel so ill, I'm sure I'm going to die," she said. "It was that onion, I know it was. I wish I had never eaten it. It must have been poisoned." "If the man has poisoned you, he shall pay for it," said the husband, and seizing a thick stick, he ran downstairs and began to beat the poor man, who had been sound asleep, and had nothing to defend himself with. Luckily, the noise roused the younger brother, who jumped off and snatched the stick from the farmer's hand, saying, "We're both going to Everett to try a lawsuit. Come to, and accuse him if they're attempted to rob or to murder you. But don't kill him now, or you'll get yourself into trouble." "Perhaps you're right," answered the farmer. "But the sooner that fellow has his deserts, the better I will be pleased." And without more words, he went to the stables and brought out a horse for himself, and also a black Andalusian mare ridden by the rich man, while the poor brother, fearing more ill treatment, stared at once at the four. He only had 4, not 6 or 7. Now, all that night had rained heavily and did not seem likely to stop, and in some places the road was so thick with mud that it was almost impossible to get across it. In one spot, it was so very bad that the mule laden with baggage got stuck in it, and tug as he might, his master could not quite pull him out. The muleteer, in despair, appealed to the 2 horsemen, who were carefully skirting the swamp at some distance off. But they paid no heed to his cries, and he began to talk cheerfully to his mule, hoping to cheer up his spirits, declaring that if the poor beast would only have a little more patience, help was sure to come. And so it did, for very soon the poor brother reached the place, bespattered with mud from head to foot, and ready to do all he could to help the mule and his master. First they set about finding some stout logs of wood to lay down on the marsh so that they could reach the mule, for by this time its frantic struggles had broken its bridle, and he was deeper than ever. Stepping cautiously along the wood, the poor man contrived to lay hold of the animal's tail, and with a desperate effort the mule managed to regain his footing on dry ground, but at the cost of leaving his tail in the poor man's hand. When he saw this, the muleteer's anger knew no bounds, and forgetting that without the help he had given him, he would have lost his mule altogether, he began to abuse the poor man, declaring that he had ruined the beast, and the law would make him pay for it. Then, jumping on the back of the mule, which was glad to be out of choking mud, that he did not even seem to mind the loss of his tail, and the grateful wretch rode on, and that evening reached the inn of Evora, where the rich man and the farmer had already arrived for the night. Meanwhile, the poor brother walked along wearily, wondering at what other dreadful adventures were in store for him. I shall certainly be condemned for one or other of them, thought he. But after all, if I have to die, I would rather choose my death than to leave it to my enemies. And as soon as he entered Evora, he looked about for a place suitable to carry out the plan he had made. At length he found what he sought, but as it was too late and too dark for him to make sure of success, he curled himself under a doorway and slept until morning. Although it was winter, the sun rose in a clear sky, and its rays felt almost warm to the poor man as he got up and shook himself. He intended it to be the day of his death, but in spite of that, all of the fact that he was leaving his wife and children behind him, he felt almost cheerful. He had struggled so long and was so very, very tired, but he would not have minded that if he could have proved his innocence and triumphed over his enemies. However, they had all been too clever for him, and he had no strength to fight any more. So he mounted the stone steps that led to the battlements of the city, and stopped for a moment to gaze about him. It happened that an old sick man had lived nearby, and begged to be carried out to be laid on the foot of the wall, so that the beams of the rising sun might fall upon him, and he would be able to talk with his friends as they passed by to work. Little did he guess that at the top of the battlements, exactly over his head, stood a man who was taking his last look at the same sun, before going to his death that he thought awaited him. But so it was, and as the steeple opposite was touched by the golden light, the poor man shut his eyes and sprang forward. The wall was high, and he flew rapidly through the air, but it was not the ground he touched, only the body of the sick man, who rolled over and died without a groan. As for the other, he was quite unhurt, and was slowly rising to his feet when his arms were suddenly seized and held. "You have killed our father! Do you see? Do you see?" cried 2 young men. "And you will come with us to the instant as judge. And you will come with us this instant before the judge and answer for it." "Your father? But I don't know him. What do you mean?" asked the poor man, who was quite bewildered with this sudden rush through the air, and could not think why he should be accused of this fresh crime. But he got no reply, and was only hurried through the streets to the courthouse, where his brother, the muleteer, and the farmer had just arrived. All as angry as ever, all talking at once, till the judge entered and ordered them to be silent. "I will hear you one by one," he said, motioning the younger brother to begin. He did not take long to state his case. The unfinished houses were his, left him with the rest of the property by his father, and his brother refused to give them up. In answer, the poor man told, in a few words, how he had begged the houses from his brother, and produced the deed of gift, which made them his owner. Made them their owner. The judge listened quietly and asked a few questions. Then he gave the verdict. The houses shall remain the property of the man to whom they were given, and to whom they belonged. And as you, he added, turning to the younger brother, brought this accusation knowing full well it was wicked and unjust, I order you, besides losing the houses, to pay £1,000 damage to your brother. The rich man heard the judge with rage in his heart, the poor man with surprise and gratitude. But he was not safe yet, for now it was the turn of the farmer. The judge could hardly conceal a smile at the story, and inquired if the wife was dead before the farmer left his house, and received the answer that he was in such a hurry for justice to be done that he had not waited to see. Then the poor man told his tale, and once more the judgment was given in his favor, with £1,200 was ordered to be paid to him. As for the muleteer, he was informed very plainly that he had proved himself mean and ungrateful for the help that he had been given, and as a punishment he must pay the poor man a fine of £50, and hand over the mule until his tail had grown again. Lastly came the two sons of the sick man. "This is the wretch that killed our father," they said. "We demand that he should also die." "How did you kill him?" asked the judge, turning to the accused, and the poor man told how he leaped from the wall, not knowing anyone was beneath. "Well, this is my judgment," replied the judge, when they had all been spoken. "Let the accused sit under a wall, and let the sons of the dead man jump from the top and fall on him and kill him. And if they do not do this, then they are condemned to pay £800 for their false accusation." The young men looked at each other and slowly shook their heads. "We will pay the fine," they said, and the judge nodded. So the poor man rode the mule home and brought back his family enough money to keep them in comfort to the end of their days. So many false accusations. One implicated. Got it all. And this next one says it's from Swahili Tales. But the one-handed girl. An old couple once lived in a hut under a grove of palm trees, and they had one son and one daughter. They were all very happy together for many years, and then the father became very ill, and felt he was going to die. He called his children to the place where he lay on the floor, for no one had any beds in that country, and said to his son, "I have no herds of cattle to give you, but only a few things here in the house. For I am a poor man, as you know. But choose, will you have my blessing or my property?" "Your property, certainly," answered the son, and his father nodded. "And you?" he asked the girl, who stood beside her brother. "I will have the blessing," she answered, and her father gave her much blessing. That night he died, and his son and daughter and wife mourned for 7 days, and gave him a burial according to the custom of his people. But hardly was the time of mourning over than the mother was attacked by disease, which was common in that country. "I'm going away from you," she said to her children in a faint voice. "But first, my son, choose what you will have, blessing or property." "Property, certainly," answered the son. "And you, my daughter?" "I will have the blessing," said the girl, and her mother gave her much blessing, and that night she died. When the days of mourning were ended, the brother bade his sister put outside the hut all that belonged to his father and mother. So the girl put them out, and he took them away, save only a small pot and a vessel in which the girl could clean the corn. But she had no corn to clean. She sat at home, sad and hungry, when a neighbor knocked at the door. "My pot is cooked by the fire. Lend me yours to cook my supper in, and I will give you a handful of corn in return." And the girl was glad, and that night she was able to have supper herself. The next day another woman borrowed her pot, and then another and another, for never were known so many accidents befall the village pots at the time. She soon grew quite fat with all the corn she had earned from the help of her pot. And then one evening she picked up a pumpkin seed in the corner and planted it near the well, and it sprang up and gave her many pumpkins. At last it happened that a youth from the village passed through the place where the girl's brother was, and the two met and talked. "What's the news there is my sister?" said the young man, who had assumed that everything had gone badly, for he was idle. "She is fat and well-liking," replied the youth, "for the women borrow her mortar and clean their corn, and borrow her pot to cook it in, and for this they give her more food than she can eat." And he went away at this. Now the brother was filled with envy at the words of this man, and he set out at once, and before dawn he reached the hut, and saw the pot and the mortar were standing outside. He slung them over his shoulder and departed, pleased with his own cleverness. But when his sister awoke and sought for the pot to cook her corn for breakfast, she could find it nowhere. At length she said to herself, "Well, some thief must have stolen them while I slept. I will go and see if any of the pumpkins are ripe." And indeed they were, so many that the tree had almost broken from the weight of them. Comment. So she ate what she wanted and took the others to the village and gave them in exchange for corn. The woman said that no pumpkins were as sweet as these, and that she was to bring every day all she had. In this way she earned more than she ever needed for herself, and soon was able to get another mortar cooking pot in exchange for her corn. Then she thought she was quite rich. Unluckily, someone else thought so too, and this was her brother's wife, who had heard all about the pumpkin tree. And sent her slave with a handful of grain to buy her a pumpkin. At first the girl told him that so few were left that she could not spare any. When she found that he belonged to her brother, she changed her mind and went out to the tree and gathered the largest and ripest there was. "Take this one," said she to the slave. "Carry it back with your mistress and tell her to keep the corn, as a pumpkin is a gift." The brother's wife was overjoyed at the sight of the fruit, and when she tasted it, she declared it was the nicest she had ever eaten. Indeed, all night she thought of nothing else, and in the early of the morning she called another slave, for she was, of course, a rich woman, and bade him to go and ask for another pumpkin. But the girl, who had just been out to look at her tree, told him that they were all eaten, so he went back and hand it to his mistress. In the evening her husband returned from hunting a long way off, and found his wife in tears. "What's the matter?" he asked. "I sent a slave with some grain to your sister to buy some pumpkins. She would not sell me any. She told me there were none, though I know she lets other people buy them." "Well, never mind now. Go to sleep," he said. "Tomorrow I will go and pull up the pumpkin tree, and that will punish her for treating you so badly." So, before sunrise, he got up and set out for his sister's house, and found her cleaning some corn. "Why did you refuse to sell my wife a pumpkin yesterday when she wanted one?" he asked. "The old ones are finished, and the new ones are not yet come," answered the girl. "When her slave arrived 2 days ago, there were only 4 left, and I gave him one, and would take no corn for it." "I do not believe you. You have sold them to all other people. I shall go and cut down the pumpkins," cried her brother in a rage. "If you cut down the pumpkin, you shall cut off my hand with it," exclaimed the girl, running up to the tree and catching hold of it. But her brother followed, and with one blow cut off the pumpkin, and her hand too. Then he went into the house and took away everything he could find, and sold the house to a friend of his who had long wished to have it, and his sister had no home to go to. Meanwhile, she had bathed her arm carefully and bound it on some healing leaves that grew nearby, and wrapped a cloth around the leaves, and she went to hide in the forest, that her brother might not find her again. For 7 days she wandered about, eating only the fruit that hung from the trees above her, and every night she climbed up and tucked herself safely among the creepers, which bound together so big branches, so that neither lions nor tigers nor panthers might get to her. When she woke up on the 7th morning, she saw from her perch smoke coming up from the little town on the edge of the forest. The sight of huts made her feel more lonely and helpless than before. She longed desperately for a draught of milk from a gourd, for there were no streams in that part. She was very thirsty. But how can she earn anything with only one hand? This thought her courage failed, and she began to cry bitterly. It happened that the king's son had come out from the town very early to shoot birds, and when the sun grew hot, he felt tired. "I will lie here and rest under this tree," he said to his attendants. "You can go and shoot instead, and I will just have the slave to stay with me." Away they went, and the young man fell asleep and slept very long. Suddenly he was awakened by something wet and salt falling on his face. "What is that? Is it raining?" he said to the slave. "Go and look." "No, master, it is not raining," answered the slave. "Then climb up the tree and see what it is." And the slave climbed up and came back and told his master that a beautiful girl was sitting up there, and that she must have been her tears which fell on the face of the king's son. "Why is she crying?" inquired the prince. "I cannot tell. I did not dare to ask her, but perhaps she would tell you." And the master, greatly wondering, climbed up the tree. "What is the matter with you?" he said gently, and as she only sobbed louder, he continued, "Are you a woman or a spirit of the woods?" "I am a woman," she answered slowly, wiping her eyes with the leaf and creeper that hung next her. "Then why do you cry?" he persisted. "I have many things to cry for," she replied, "more than you could ever guess." "Come home with me," said the prince. "It is not very far. Come home to my father and mother. I am a king's son." "Then why are you here?" she said, opening her eyes and staring at him. "Once every month I and my friends shoot birds in the forest," he answered. "But I was tired and bade them to leave me to rest. And you, what are you doing up in this tree?" At that she began to cry again, and told the king's son all that had befallen her since the death of her mother. "I cannot come down with you, for I do not like anyone to see me," she ended with a sob. "Oh, I will manage that," said the king's son, and swinging himself to a lower branch, he bade his slave go quickly to town and bring back with him 4 strong men and a curtain leader. When the man was gone, the girl climbed down and hid herself on the ground in some bushes. Very soon the slave returned with the litter, which was placed on the ground close to the bushes where the girl lay. "Now, all of you go and call my attendants, for I do not wish to stay here any longer," he said to the men. And as soon as they were out of the sight, he bade the girl get into the litter and fasten the curtains tightly. Then he got on the other side and waited till his attendants came up. "What is the matter, O King of the Sun?" they asked breathlessly and running. "I think I am ill. I am cold," he said, and saying to the bearers, he drew the curtains and was carried through the forest right inside his little house. "Tell my father and mother that I have a fever and that I want some gruel," he said, "and bid them send it quickly." So the slave hastened to the king's palace and gave his message, which troubled both the king and queen greatly. A pot of hot gruel was instantly prepared and carried over to the sick man. As soon as the council which was sitting was over, the king and his ministers went to pay him a visit, bearing a message from the queen that she would follow a little later. Now the prince had pretended to be ill in order to soften his parents' hearts, and the next day he declared he felt better, and getting into his litter was carried to the palace in state, drums being beaten all the way along. He dismounted at the foot of the steps and walked up, a great parasol being held over his head by a slave. Then he entered the cool, dark room where his father and mother were sitting, and said to them, "I saw a girl yesterday in the forest whom I wished to marry, and, unknown to my attendants, I brought her back to the house and led her. Give me your consent, I beg, for no other woman pleases me as well. even though she has but one hand. Of course, the king and queen would have preferred their daughter two hands, and no one would have thought riches with her, but they could not bear to say no to their son. So they told him he should be his close, and that the wedding feast should be prepared immediately. The girl could scarcely believe her good fortune, and in gratitude to all the kindness shown to her, she was useful and pleasant to her husband's parents, that they soon loved her. Yes, Otter? By and by a baby was born to him, and soon after that the prince was sent on a journey by his father to visit some distant town of the kingdom, to set things right that had gone wrong. No sooner had he started than the girl's brother, who had wasted all his riches his wife had brought him in this reckless folly, and was very poor, chanced to come into town, and as he passed he heard a man say, "Did you know the king's son has married a woman who has lost one of her hands?" On hearing these words, the brother stopped and asked, "Where did he find such a woman?" "In the forest," answered the man, and the cruel brother guessed at once it must be his sister. A great rage took possession of his soul, and he thought of the girl whom he tried to ruin being so much better off than himself, and he vowed that he would work her ill. Therefore, that very afternoon, he made his way to the palace and asked to see the king. When he was admitted to his presence, he knelt down and touched the ground with his forehead, and the king bade him stand up and tell wherefore he had come. "By the kindness of your heart you have been deceived, O king," said he. "Your son has married a girl who lost the hand. Do you know why she has lost it? She was a witch, and she has wedded 3 husbands, and each husband has been put to death by her arts. Then the people of the town cut off her hand and turned her into the forest. And what I say is true, and her town is also my own." The king listened, and his face grew dark. Luckily, he had a hasty temper and did not stop for reason, and instead of sending to town to discovering people that knew his daughter-in-law, he could have been told how hard she had worked and how poor she had been. He believed all her brother's lying words, and made the queen believe them too. Together they took counsel what they should do, and in the end they decided that they would put her out of the town. But this did not content her brother. "Kill her," he said. "It is no more than she deserves for daring marry the king's son, and she can do no more hurt to anyone." "We cannot kill her," he said. "If we did, our son would assuredly kill us. Let us do as others did, and put her out of the town." And with this envious brother was forced to be content. The poor girl loved her husband very much, but just as then the baby was more to her than all else in the world, and as long as she had him with her, she did not mind much of anything. So, taking her son in her arm, and hanging the little earthen pot around her neck, she left her house, and with its great peacock fans and slaves and seats of ivory, plunged back into the forest. For a while she walked, not knowing whither she went, and then by and by she grew tired, and sat under a tree to hush her baby to sleep. Suddenly she raised her eyes and saw a snake wriggling from under the bushes towards her. "I am a dead woman," she said to herself, and stayed quite still, for indeed she was too frightened to move. In another minute the snake had reached her side, and to her surprise he spoke. "Open your earthen pot and let me in. Save me from the sun. I will save you from rain." And she opened the pot, and when the snake had slipped in, she put on the cover. Soon she beheld another snake coming after the other one. And when it reached her, it stopped and said, "Did you see a small gray snake pass this way just now?" "Yes," she answered. "It was going very quickly." "Ah, I must hurry and catch it up," replied the second snake, and it hastened on. But when it was out of sight, the voice from the pot said, Uncover me. And she lifted the lid, and the little snake slid rapidly to the ground. I'm safe now, it said. But tell me, where are you going? I cannot tell you, for I do not know, she answered. I am just wandering in the wood. Follow me and let us go home together, said the snake. And the girl followed him through the forest along the green path till they came to a great lake, where they stopped to rest. The sun is hot, said the snake, but you have walked far. Take your baby and bathe in that cool place where the boughs of the trees stretched far over the water. Yes, I will, answered she, and they went in. The baby splashed and cried with delight, and when he gave a spring and fell right in, down, 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 his mother could not find him, though she searched among the reeds. Full of terror, she made her way back to the bank and called to the snake, My baby is gone. He is drowned. I shall never see him again. Going once more, said the snake. Feel everywhere, even amongst the trees that have their roots in the water, lest perhaps he may be held fast there. Swiftly she went back and felt everywhere with her whole hand, even putting her fingers into the tiniest crannies, where a crab could have hardly taken a shelter. No, he is not there, she cried. How am I to live without him? But the snake took no notice, and only answered, Put in your other arm too. What is the use of that, she asked, when it has no hand to feel with? But all the same, she did as she was bid. In an instant the wounded arm touched something soft and round, lying between stones and a clump of reeds. My baby! My baby! She shouted and lifted him up, merry and laughing, and did not a bit hurt or frightened. Have you found him this time? Said the snake. Oh, yes, she answered. And why, I've got my hand back again. And for this sheer joy burst into tears. But the snake let her weep for a little while. Then he said, Now we will journey on to my family, and they will all repay you for your kindness you have showed me. You have done more than enough in giving me back my hand, replied the girl. The snake only smiled. Be quick, lest the sun should set, he answered, and began to wriggle along so fast that the girl could hardly follow it. By and by they arrived at the house in a tree where the snake lived, when he was not traveling with his mother and father. And he told them all his adventures, and how he had escaped from his enemy. The father and mother snake did not do enough to show their gratitude. They made their guest lie down in a hammock woven of the strong creepers which hung from bough to bough, till she was quite rested after her wanderings, while they watched the baby and gave him milk to drink from the coconuts which they persuaded their friends the monkeys to crack for them. They even managed to carry small fruit tied up in their tails for the baby's mother, who felt at last that she was safe and at peace. Not that she forgot her husband, for she often thought of him and longed to show him their son. In the night she would sometimes lie awake and wonder where he was. In this manner, many weeks passed by. And what was the prince doing? Well, he had fallen very ill when he was on the furthest border of the kingdom, and he was nursed by some kind people who did not know who he was, so that the king and queen heard nothing about him. When he was better, he made his way slowly home again, and into his father's palace, where he found a strange man standing among the throne in peacock feathers. This was his wife's brother, whom the king had taken into high favor, though of course the prince was quite ignorant of what had happened. For a moment the king and queen stared at their son, as if he had been unknown to them. He had grown so thin and weak during his illness that his shoulders were bowed like those of an old man. Have you forgotten me so soon? He asked. At the sound of his voice they gave a cry and ran towards him, and poured out questions as to what happened and why he looked like that, but the prince did not answer any of them. "How is my wife?" he said, and there was a pause. Then the queen replied, "She is dead." "Dead," he repeated, stepping a little backwards. "And my child?" "He is dead too." The young man stood silent. Then he said, "Show me their graves." At these words, the king, who had been feeling rather uncomfortable, took heart again, for he had not prepared two beautiful tombs for his son to see, so that he might never guess what he had done to his wife. All these months, the king and queen had been telling each other how good and merciful they had been to not take her brother's advice and put her to death. But now, this somehow did not seem certain. Then the king led the way around the courtyard, just behind the palace, and through the gate into a beautiful garden where stood two splendid tombs in a green space under the trees. The prince advanced alone and rested his head against a stone, and he burst into tears. His father and mother stood silently behind, with a curious pang in their souls which they could not quite understand. It's called guilt. Could it be that they were ashamed of themselves? They better be. But after a while the prince turned around, and walking past them into the palace, he bade the slaves bring him mourning. For 7 days he saw no one, but at the end of them he went out hunting, and helped his father rule his people as before. Only no one dared to speak to him about his wife and son. One last morning, after the girl had been lying awake all night thinking of her husband, she said to her friend the snake, "You have all shown me such kindness, but now I am well again and want to go home and hear some news of my husband, and if he still mourns for me." Now the heart of the snake was sad at her words, but he only said, "Yes, this must go. Yes, thus it must be. Go and bid farewell to my mother and father, but if they offer you a present, see that you take nothing but my father's ring and my mother's casket." So she went to the parent snakes, who wept bitterly at the thought of losing her, and offered her gold and jewels, as much as she could carry in remembrance of them. But the girl shook her head and pushed the shining heap away from her. "I shall never forget you, ever," she said in a broken voice. "But the only tokens I will accept from you are the little ring and this old casket." Two snakes looked at each other in dismay. The ring and the casket were the only things they did not want her to have. Then, after a short pause, they spoke. "Why do you want the ring and casket so much? Who has told you of them?" "Oh, nobody. It's just my fancy," she answered. But the old snakes shook their heads and replied, "That's so. It is our son who told you, and as he said, so it must be. If you need food, clothes, or a house, tell the ring and it will find them for you. If you are unhappy or in danger, tell the casket and it will set things right." Then they both gave her their blessing, and she picked up her baby and went her way. She walked for a long time, till at length she came upon a town where her husband and his father dwelt. Here she stopped under a grove of palm trees and told the ring that she wanted a house. "It is ready, mistress," answered a queer little voice which made her jump, and look behind her. She saw a lovely palace made of the finest wood, and a row of slaves with tall fans bowing before the door. Glad indeed she was to enter, for she was very tired, and after eating a good supper of fruit and milk, she found one of the rooms, and she flung herself down on a pile of cushions and went to sleep with her baby beside her. Here she stayed quietly, and every day the baby grew taller and stronger, and very soon he could run and even talk. Of course, the neighbors had a great deal to say about the house which had been built so very quickly on the outskirts of town, and invented all kinds of stories about the rich lady who lived in it. But now, by and by, when the king returned with his son from the wars, some of these tales had reached his ears. "It is really very odd about that house under the palms," he said to the queen. "I must find out something about the lady whom no one ever sees. I dare say it is not a lady at all, but a gang of conspirators who want to get possession of my throne. Tomorrow I shall take my son and my chief ministers and insist on getting inside." Soon after sunrise the next day, the prince's wife was standing on a little hill behind the house, when she saw a cloud of dust coming through the town. A moment afterwards she heard faintly the roll of drums that announced the king's presence, and saw a crowd of people approaching the grove of palms. Her heart beat fast. Could her husband be among them? In any case, they must not discover her there, so just bidding the ring prepare some food for them, she ran inside and bound a veil of golden gauze around her head and face. Then, taking the child's hand, she went to the door and waited. In a few minutes the whole procession came up, and she stepped forward and begged them to come in and rest. "Willingly," answered the king. "First go, and we will follow you." They followed her into a long dark room, in which was a table covered with gold cups and baskets, filled with dates and coconuts and all kinds of ripe yellow fruits. And the king and the prince sat upon the cushions and were served by slaves, while the ministers, among whom she recognized her brother, stood behind. "I owe all my misery to him," she said to herself. "From the first he has hated me." But outwardly she showed nothing, and when the king asked her what news there was in town, she only answered, "You have ridden far. Eat first and drink, for you must be hungry and thirsty, and then I will tell you my news." "You speak sense," answered the king, and silence prevailed for some time longer. Then he said, "Now, lady, I have finished and am refreshed. Therefore tell me, I pray you, who you are and whence you come. But first, be seated." She bowed her head and sat down on a big scarlet cushion, drawing her little boy, who was asleep in a corner, onto her knee, and began to tell the story of her life. As her brother listened, he would fain have left the house and hidden himself in the forest, but it was his duty to wave the fan of peacock feathers over the king's head and keep off the flies, and he knew he would be seized by the royal guards if he tried to desert his post. He must stay where he was. There was no help for it, and luckily for him, the king was much too interested in the tale to notice the fan was ceasing movement, and that the flies were dancing right in the top of his thick curly hair. The story went on, but the storyteller never once looked at the prince, even through her veil, though the side he was on never moved his eyes from her. When she reached the part where she had been weeping in the tree, the king's son could restrain himself no longer. "It is my wife," he cried, springing to where she sat with the sleeping child in her lap. "They have lied to me, and you are not dead after all, and nor the boy either. But what has happened? Why did they lie to me? And why did you leave the house where you were safe?" And he turned and looked fiercely at his father. "Let me finish my tale first. Then you will know," answered she, throwing back her veil, and she told how her brother had come to the palace and accused her of being a witch, and had tried to persuade the king to slay her. "But he could not do that," she answered. "After all, if I stayed in your house, I should have never met the snake, nor have got my hand back again. So let us forget about all that, and be happy once more. For see, your son is grown quite a big boy." "And what shall be done with your brother?" asked the king, who was glad to think that someone had acted in this manner worse than himself. "Put him out of the town," answered she. Okay, well, just in time for the ad break. After me snoozing it twice. I will see everyone in a bit. Okay, so Rich Brother, Poor Brother was 9 pages long. One-Handed Girl was 12. Luckily, the next few, well, the next one's only 4, the one after that's 9, and the one after that's 5. So we might be able to do 3 more tonight, but we'll see what happens. I already used 2 out of my 3 pauses for ads, so I'll have to see what happens. The next story for our fabulous Friday Night of Fairy Tales. The Bones of Djulung. Of Djulung, yeah. In a beautiful island that lies in the southern seas, where chains of gay orchids bind the trees together, and days and nights are equally long and nearly equally hot, there once lived a family of 7 sisters. The father and mother were dead, and they had no brothers, so the eldest girl ruled over the rest, and they did as she bade them. One sister had to clean the house, second carried the water from the spring in the forest, the third cooked their food, while the youngest fell with the hardest task, for she had to cut and bring home wood, which was to keep the fire burning continually. This was very hot and tiring work, and when she had fed the fire and heaped up in a corner the sticks that were supplied the next day, she often threw herself down under a tree and went sound asleep. One morning, however, as she was staggering along with her bundle on her back, she thought that the river which flowed past their hut looked so cool and inviting that she determined to bathe in it, instead of taking her usual nap. Hastily piling up her load by the fire and thrusting some sticks into the flames, she ran down to the river and jumped in. How delicious it was diving and swimming and floating in the dark forest, where the trees were so thick that you could hardly see the sun. But after a while she began to look about her, and her eyes fell on a little fish that seemed made out of a rainbow, so brilliant were the colors he flashed out. I should like him as a pet, thought the girl, and the next time she fish swam by, she put her hand out and caught him. Then she ran along the grassy path till she came to the cave in front of which the stream fell over some rocks in a basin. Here she put her little fish, whose name was Jundul, Djulung, and promising to return as soon and bring him some dinner, she went away. By the time she got home, the rice for their dinner was already cooked, and the eldest sister gave the other 6 their portions in 1 bowl. But the youngest did not finish hers, when no one was looking, stole off to the fountain in the forest where the little fish was swimming about. See, I have not forgotten you, she cried, and one by one she let the grains of rice fall into the water, where the fish gobbled them up greedily, for he had never tasted anything so nice. That is all for today, she said at last, but I will come again tomorrow, and bidding him good-bye, she went down the path. Now the girl did not tell her sisters about the fish, but every day she saved half of her rice to give him, and called him softly in a little song she had made for herself. If she sometimes felt hungry, no one knew of it, and indeed she did not mind that much. She saw how the fish enjoyed it. And the fish grew big and fat, and the girl grew thin and weak, and the loads of wood felt heavier every day, and at last her sisters took notice. Then they took counsel together, and watched her to see what she did, and one of them followed her to the fountain where Djulung lived, and saw her give him all the rice she had saved from her breakfast. Hastening home, the sister told the others what she had witnessed, and that a lovely fat fish might be had for their catching. So the eldest sister went and caught him, and he was boiled for supper, but the younger sister was away in the woods, and did not know anything about it. Next morning she went as usual to the cave and sang her little song, but Djulung did not come to answer it. She sang twice and thrice. Then she threw herself on her knees by the edge and peered into the dark water, but the trees cast such a deep shadow that her eyes could not pierce it. Djulung cannot be dead, or his body would be floating on the surface, she said to herself, and rising to her feet she set out homewards, feeling all of a sudden strangely tired. What does the matter with me? She thought, but somehow or other she managed to reach the hut, and threw herself down in a corner, where she slept so soundly that for days no one was able to wake her. At length, one early morning, the cock began to crow so loud that she could sleep no longer, and as he continued to crow she seemed to understand what he was saying, that he was telling her that Djulung was dead, killed and eaten by her sisters, and that his bones lay buried under the kitchen fire. Very softly she got up, and took a large stone from under the fire, and creeping out carried the bones to the cave by the fountain, where she dug a hole and buried them anew. And she scooped out of the hole with a stick and sang a song, bidding the bones to grow until they became a tree that reached up high into the heavens, that its leaves would fall across the sea to another land, where the king would pick them up. There was no Djulung to give her rice to, so the girl soon began to get fat again, and as she was able to do her work as old, the sisters did not trouble about her. They never guessed that when she went into the forest to gather sticks, she never failed to pay a visit to the tree, which grew taller and more wonderful day by day. Never was such a tree seen before. Its trunk was of iron, its leaves were of silk, its flowers of gold, and its fruit of diamonds. One evening, though the girl did not know it, a soft breeze broke off one of the leaves and blew it across the sea to the feet of one of the king's attendants. What a curious leaf! I've never beheld one like it before. I must show it to the king, he said. When the king saw it, he declared that he would never rest until he found the tree that would bore it, even if he had to spend the rest of his life in visiting islands that lay all around him. Happily for him, he began with the island that was nearest, and here in the forest he suddenly saw standing before him the iron tree, its boughs covered with shining leaves like the one that he was carried about with him. But what sort of tree is this, and how did it get here? Asked one of the attendants with him. No one could answer, but they were about to pass by out of the forest when a little boy went by, and the king stopped and inquired if there was anyone living in the neighborhood whom he might question. 7 girls live down here, replied the boy, pointing with his finger to where the sun was setting. Go, bring them here. I will wait, said the king, and the boy ran off and told the sisters that a great chief with a string of jewels round his neck had sent for them. Pleased and excited, the 6 elder sisters at once followed the boy, but the youngest, who was busy and who did not care about strangers, stayed behind to finish the work she was doing. The king welcomed the girls eagerly and asked them all manner of questions about the tree, but as they had never heard of its existence, they could tell him nothing. And if we, who live close by the forest, do not know, we may find no one that does, answered the eldest, who was rather cross at finding this was all the king had wanted of him. But the boy told me there are 7 of you. There are only 6 here, said the king. Oh, the youngest is at home. She is always half asleep, and it is of no use to cut wood for the fire, answered they in a breath. That may be, but perhaps she dreams, answered the king. Anyway, I will speak with her also. Then he signed to one of the attendants, who followed the path that the boy had taken to the hut. Soon the man returned, with the girl walking behind him, and as soon as she reached the tree, it bowed itself to the earth before her, and she stretched out her hand and picked some of the leaves and flowers, and gave them to the king. A maiden that can work such wonders is fitted to be the wife of the greatest chief, he said, and so he married her, and took her with him across the sea to his home, where they lived happily forever after. Yeah, interesting story. No South Seas, so I can picture a rainbow fish becoming an iron tree. Anyway, next story for the night. The Sea King's Gift. There was once a fisherman who was called Salmon, and his Christian name was Matt. He lived by the shore of the big sea. Where else could he live? He had a wife named May. Could not find a better name for her. In winter they dwelt in a little cottage by the shore, but in spring they flitted out to Red Rock in the sea and stayed there the whole summer until it was autumn. The cottage on the rock was even smaller than the other. It had a wooden bolt instead of an iron lock to hold the door, a stone hearth with flagstaff, and a weathercock on the roof. The rock was called Athola, and was not larger than a marketplace of a town. Between the crevices there grew a little rowan tree and 4 alder bushes. Heaven only knows how they came to be there, but perhaps they were brought by winter storms. Besides that, there flourished some tufts of velvety green and sometimes scattered weeds, and 2 plants of the yellow herb called tansy, and 4 of a red flower, and a pretty white one. But the treasures of the rock consisted of 3 roots of garlic, which May put in a cleft. The rock wall sheltered them on the north side, and the sun shone on them in the south. This does not seem like much, but it sufficed for May for an herb plot. All good things go in threes. So Matt and his wife fished for salmon in spring, for herring in summer, and for cod in winter. When on Saturdays the weather was fine and the wind favorable, they sailed to the nearest town and sold their fish, and went to church on Sunday. But it often happened that for weeks at a time they were quite alone on the rock at Tola, and had nothing to look at except the little brown dog, which bore the name of Prince. Their great grass tufts, the bushes and blooms, the sea bays and fish, a stormy sky, and the blue, white-crested waves. For the rock lay far away from land, and there were no green inlets or human habitations for miles around. Only here and there appeared a rock of the same red stone as Atola, sprinkled day and night with ocean spray. Matt and May were industrious, hard-working folk, happy and contented in their poor huts, and they thought themselves rich when they were able to salt many casks of fish that they required for winter, and yet have some left with which they could buy tobacco for the old man, and a pound or 2 of coffee for his wife, with plenty of burned corn and chicory in it to give it flavor. Besides that, they had bread, butter, fish, a beer cask, and a buttermilk jar. What more did they require? All would have gone well had not May been possessed with a secret longing for which never let her rest. And this was, how could she manage to become the owner of a cow? "What would you do with a cow?" said Matt. She could not swim that far, and our boat is not large enough to bring her over here. And even if we had her, we have nothing to feed her on." "We have 4 alder bushes and green tufts of grass," rejoined May. "Yes, of course," remarked Matt. "We also have 3 plants of garlic. Garlic would be fine for feeding her." "Every cow likes salt herring," rejoined his wife. "Even Prince is fond of fish." "That may be," said her husband. "Methinks she soon would be a dear cow if we had to feed her on salt herring. All very well for Prince, who fights with the gulls for every last morsel. Put a cow out of your head, mother. We're very well off as we are." May sighed. She knew well that her husband was right, but she could not give up on the idea of a cow. The buttermilk no longer tasted good as usual in the coffee. She thought sweet cream and fresh butter, and how there would be nothing in the world to compare with them. One day, as Matt and his wife were cleaning herring on the shore, they heard Prince barking, and soon there appeared a gaily painted boat with 3 young men on it, steering towards the rock. They were students on a boating excursion, and wanted to get something to eat. "Bring us a junket, good mother," they cried to May. "If only I had such a thing," said May. "Then a can of fresh milk, then?" said the students. "But it must be not skim." "Yes, if only I had it," sighed the old woman, still more deeply. "What? You haven't got a cow?" May was silent. This question so struck her to the heart that she could not reply. "We have no cow," answered Matt, "but we have a good smoked herring, and can cook them in a couple of hours." "All right, then, that will do," said the students, as they flung themselves down a rock, while 50 silvery white herring were turned in a spit and fire. "What's the name of this little stone in the middle of the ocean?" asked one of them. "Athola," answered the old man. "Well, you would want for nothing if you were to live in the Sea King's dominion. Matt could not understand. He had never read the Kabbalah and knew nothing of the sea gods of old, but the students proceeded to explain to him. Ati, they said, is a mighty king who lives in his dominion of Atola, and has a rock in the bottom of the sea, and possesses, besides, a treasure of good things. He rules over all fish and animals of the deep, and has the finest cows and swiftest horses that ever chewed grass at the bottom of the ocean. He who stands well with Ati is soon a rich man, but one must beware in dealing with him, for he is very changeful and touchy. Even little stones thrown into the water might offend him, and then he takes back his gift, and stirs up the sea into a storm and drags sailors down into the depths. Ati owns some of the finest maidens who would bear a train of his queen Wilmos, and at the sound of music they comb their long flowing locks, which glisten in the water. Oh, cried Matt, have you worships really seen that all? We have as good as seen it, said the student. It is all printed in a book, and everything printed is true. I'm not so sure of that, said Matt, as he shook his head. But the herring were now ready, and the students ate number 6, and gave Prince some cold meat, which they had happened to have on the boat. Prince sat on his hind legs with delight, and mewed like a pussy-cat. When all was finished, the students handed Matt a shining silver coin, and allowed him to fill his pipe with a special kind of tobacco. Then they thanked him for his kind hospitality and went on their journey, much regretted by Prince, who sat in the woeful expression, and whined on shore as long as he could see a flip of the boat's white sail in the distance. May never uttered a word, but thought the more. She had good ears, and it laid to heart the story of Ati. How delightful, she thought to herself, to possess a fairy cow. How delicious every morning and evening to draw milk from it, and yet to have no trouble about the feeding, and to keep a shelf near the window for dishes and milk and junkets. This will never be my luck. What are you thinking about? Asked Matt. Nothing, said his wife. All the time she was pondering over the magic rhymes she had heard from her childhood from an old lame man, which were supposed to bring good luck to fishing. What if I were to try? She thought. Now, this was Saturday, and on Saturday evenings Matt never set the herring net, for he did not fish on Sunday. Towards evening, however, his wife said, Let us set the herring net just this once. No, said her husband, it is Saturday night. Last night was so stormy, and we caught so little, urged his wife. Tonight the sea is like a mirror, and with the wind in the direction the herring are drawn towards land. But the streaks in the northwestern sky, and the prince was eating grass this evening, said the old man. Surely he's not eating my garlic, exclaimed the old woman. No, but there will be with rough weather by tomorrow at sunset, rejoined Matt. Listen to me, said his wife. We will set only one net close to the shore, and then we will be able to pick up our half-filled cask, which will spoil if it stands open so long. The old man allowed himself to be talked over, and so they rowed out to the net. When they reached the deepest part of the water, she began to hum the words of the magic rhyme, altering the words to suit the longings of her heart. O Ati, with the long, long beard, who dwellest in the deep blue sea, finest treasures have I heard, and glittering fish belong to thee. The richest pearls beyond compare are stored up in thy realm below. The ocean's cows are sleek and fair, feed on the grass in thy meadow. King of waters far and near, I ask not of thy garden store. I wish not jewels or pearls to wear, nor silver either ask I for. But one is odd and even is two. Give me a cow, sea king so bold, and in return I give to you a slice of the moon and the sun's gold. What are you humming? Asked the old man. Oh, only the words of an old rhyme that keeps running in my head, answered the old woman, and she raised her voice and went on. O Ati with the long, long beard, who dwellest in the deep blue sea, 1,000 cows are in thy herd, I pray thee give one unto me. That's a stupid song, said Matt. What else should one beg for the Sea King but fish? But such songs are not for Sunday. His wife pretended not to hear him, and sang the same tune all the time they were on the water. Matt heard nothing more as he sat and rowed the heavy boat, while thinking of his cracked pipe and his fine tobacco. Then they turned to the island, and soon after went to bed. But neither Matt nor May could sleep a wink. The one thought of how he had profaned Sunday, and the other about his cow. About midnight, the fisherman sat up and said to his wife, "Dost thou hear anything?" "No," said she. "I think the twirling of the weather clock on the roof bodes ill," he said. "We'll soon have a storm." "Oh, it is nothing but your fancy," said his wife. Matt lay down, and soon rose again. "The weathercock is squeaking now," he said. "Just fancy, go to sleep," said his wife, and the old man tried to. For the third time he jumped out of bed. "Oh, how the weathercock is roaring at the pitch of its voice, and if it had a fire inside it! We're going to have a tempest. We must bring in the nets." Both rose. The summer night was dark as if it had been October, and the weathercock creaked, and the storm was raging in every direction. As they went out, the sea lay around them as white as snow, and the spray was dashing over the fisher huts. In all his life, Matt had never remembered such a sight. To launch the boat and put to sea and rescue the net was not the thing to be thought of. The fisherman and his wife stood aghast at the doorstep, holding on fast on the doorpost while the foam was splashed over their faces. "Did I not tell thee that there was no luck in Sunday fishing?" said Matt sulkily, and his wife was so frightened that she never even once thought about his cows. As there was nothing to be done, they went in. Their eyes were heavy from lack of slumber, and they slept as soundly as if there had been no such thing as an angry sea roaring furiously around their lonely dwelling. When they awoke, the sun was high in the heavens. The tempest had ceased, and only the swell of the sea rose in silvery heavings against the red rock. "What can that be?" said the old woman as she peeped out from the door. "It looks like a big seal." "As sure as I live, it's a cow!" exclaimed Betty. And certainly it was a cow, a fine red cow, flat and fat and flourishing, and looking as if it had been fed all its days on spinach, wandering peacefully up and down the shore, and never so much as even looked at the poor little tufts of grass, as if it despised such fare. Matt could not believe his eyes, but a cow she seemed, and it was a cow she found to be. And when the old woman began to milk her, every pitcher and pan, even to the boiler, was soon filled with the most delicious milk. The old man troubled his head in vain as to how she came there, and sallied forth to seek his lost net. He had not prepared far when he cast that out on shore, and so full of fish that not a mesh was visible. "There's no time fine to process a cow," said Milton, as he cleaned his fish. "Well, what are we going to feed her?" "We shall find some means," said his wife. And the cow found the means herself. She went out and cropped the seaweed which grew in abundance near the shore, and always kept in good condition. Everyone, Prince alone expected, thought that this was a clever beast, but Prince barked at her, and for now he had got no rival. From that day the Red Rock overflowed with milk and junkets. Every net was filled with fish. Matt and May grew fat on fine living and became richer. She churned quantities of butter, and he hired 2 men to help him with his fishing. The sea lay before them like a big fish tank, out of which he hauled many as he required, and the cow continued to fend for itself. In autumn, when Matt and May went to shore, the cow went to sea, and in spring, when they returned, the cow stood waiting for them. "We shall require a better house," as May said the following summer. "One is too old and small for ourselves and men." "Yes," said Matt. So he built a large cottage with a real lock on the door, and a storehouse for the fish as well, and he and his men caught such quantities of fish that they sent tons of salmon, herring, and cod to Russia and Sweden. I'm quite overworked with so many folks, said May. A girl to help me would not come amiss. Good one then, said her husband, and so they hired a girl. Then May said, we have too little milk for all these folk. Now that I have a servant, it's the same amount of trouble she could look after 3 cows. All right, then, said her husband, somewhat provoked. You can sing a song to the fairies. This annoyed May, but nevertheless she rode out to the sea Sunday night and sang as before. Ati with the long, long beard, who dwells in the deep blue sea. 1,000 cows are in thy herd. I pray thee give 3 unto me. The following morning, instead of 1, 3 cows stood on the island. They ate all the seaweed and fended for themselves like the first one. Art thou satisfied now? Said Matt to his wife. I should be quite satisfied, said his wife, if only I had 2 servants to help, and if I had some finer clothes. Don't you know that I am addressed as madam? Well, well, said her husband. So May got several servants and clothes fit for the lady. Everything will be perfect now if only we had a little better dwelling for summer. You might build a 2-story house and fetch some soil to make a garden. Then you might make a little arbor up there and let's have a little sea view. We might have a fiddler to fiddle to us in the evening and a little streamer to take us to church in the morning in stormy weather. Anything more? Asked Matt, as he did everything that his wife wished. The Rakatoa became so grand and May so great that all the sea urchins and herring were lost in wonderment. Even Prince was fed on beefsteaks and cream scones till he was as round as a butter jar. Are you satisfied now? Said Matt. I should be quite satisfied, said May. Only I had 30 cows. At least that number is required for such a household. Go to the fairies, said Matt. His wife set out in a new steamer and sang to the Sea King. Next morning 30 cows stood on the shore, all finding food for themselves. Knowest thou, good man, that we are too far cramped on this wretched rock, and where am I to find room for so many cows? There's nothing to be done but pump out to the sea. Rubbish, said his wife. Who can pump out the sea? Try with a new steamer. There's a pump in it. May knew well that her husband was only making fun of her, but still her mind was set upon the same subject. I could never pump the sea out, she thought. But perhaps I've filled up, if I were to make a big dam, might heap on sand and stones and make our island bigger again. May loaded her boat with stones and went out to sea. The fiddler was with her and fiddled so finely that Ati and Wellamos and all the sea's daughters rose to the surface of the water to listen to the music. What is that shining so brightly in the waves? Asked May. That's the sea foam glinting with the sunshine, answered the fiddler. Throw out the stones, said May. The people in the boat began to throw out stones, splish, splash, right and left into the foam. One stone hits the nose of Wellmo's chief lady in waiting. Another scratched the Sea Queen herself right on the cheek. A third plumped close to Ati's head and tore off half the Sea King's beard. Then there was a commotion in the sea, and the waves bubbled and bubbled like boiling water in a pot. Whence comes this gust of wind? Said May. As she spoke, the sea opened and swallowed the steamer. May sank to the bottom like a stone. By stretching out her arms and legs, she floated to the surface, where she found the fiddler's fiddle and used it to float. At the same moment she saw close beside her the terrible head of Ati, and he had only half a beard. Why did you throw stones at me? Roared the Sea King. Oh, your majesty, it was a mistake. Put some bear's grease on your beard, and that will soon make it grow again. Dame, I did not give you all you asked. Dame, did I not give you all you asked for? Nay, even more. Truly, truly, your majesties. Many thanks for the cows. Well, where is the gold from the sun and silver from the moon that you promised me? Your majesty, they have been scattered day and night upon the sea, except when the sun was overcast, shyly answered May. I'll teach you. roared the Sea King, and with that he gave the fiddle such a puff that it sent the old woman up like a skyrocket on her island. There Princely, as famished as ever, gnawing the carcass of a crow. There sat Matt with his ragged gray jacket, quite alone on the steps of the old huts, mending a net. Heavens, mother, he said, where are you coming out from such a whirlwind place? And what makes you so dripping condition? May looked around in amaze. Where is our two-story house? What house? Asked her husband. Our big house, and the flower garden, and the men, and the maids, and 30 beautiful cows, and steamer, and everything else. You're talking nonsense, mother. The students quite turned your head, for you sang silly songs last evening while you were rowing, and then you did not sleep till early morning. We had stormy weather during the night, and when it was past I did not wish to waken you, so I rowed out alone to rescue the net. But I've seen Addie, rejoined Marie. You've been lying in bed dreaming foolish fancies, mother, and then in your sleep you walked into the water. But there's the fiddle, said May. Fine fiddle? It's only an old stick. No, no, old woman. Another time we'll be more careful. Good luck never attends fishing on Sunday. The student said that throwing rocks would piss off Audie. Clearly, they did. He took everything back. Because, well, she didn't give him what she promised. Okay. Let's see if I can get one more story for tonight. And that story would be The Raspberry Worm. Phew, cried Lisa. Cried Dana. What now? Cried the big sister. A worm, cried Lisa. On the raspberry, cried Dana. Kill it, cried Otto. What's the fuss over a poor little worm? Said the sister scornfully. Yes, when we had cleaned the raspberry so carefully, said Lisa. It crept out from that very large one, put in Ana. And supposing we'd eaten one of the raspberries, said Lisa. Then we would have eaten the worm, too, said Ana. Well, what harm? Said Otto. Eat a worm, cried Lisa. And kill him with one bite, murmured Ana. Just think of it, said Otto, laughing. Now it's crawling on the table, cried Ana again. Blow it away, said the big sister. Tramp on it, replied Otto. But Lisa took a raspberry leaf, swept the worm carefully on the leaf, and carried it to the yard. Then Ana noticed that a sparrow sitting on the fence was getting ready to pounce on the poor little worm, so she took up the leaf and carried it out into the wood and hid it under a raspberry bush where the greedy sparrow could not find it. Yes, and what more is there to tell about the raspberry worm? Who would give 3 straws of such a miserable little thing? Yes, but who would not like to live in a pretty home as it lives in such fresh, fragrant, dark red cottage far away from the quiet wood among flowers and green leaves? Now it was just dinner time, so they all had dinner of raspberries and cream. Be careful with the sugar, Otto, said the big sister, but Otto's plate was like a snowdrift in winter, with just a little red under the snow. Soon after dinner, the big sister said, Now I've eaten up all the raspberries, and we have none left to make preserves for the winter. It would be fine if we got 2 full baskets of berries. Then we could clean them all this evening, and tomorrow we could cook them in the big preserving pan. And then we could have raspberry jam to eat on your bread. Come, let us go to the wood and pick, said Lisa. Yes, let us, said Dana. Take your yellow basket, and I'll take the green one. Don't get lost, and come back safely in the evening, said the big sister. Greetings to the raspberry worm, said Otto mockingly. Next time I meet him, I shall do him the honor of eating him up. So Ana and Lisa went off to the wood. How beautiful. It was certainly tiresome sometimes climbing over fallen trees and getting caught in the branches, and waging war with the juniper bushes and midges, but what did that matter? The girls climbed well in their short dresses, and soon they were deep in the wood. There were plenty of bilberries and elderberries, but no raspberries. They wandered on, and at last they came to, no, it could not be true. They came to a large raspberry wood. The wood had been on fire once, and now raspberry bushes had grown up, and there were raspberry bushes and raspberry bushes as far as the eye could see. Every bush was weighed to the ground with the largest, dark red, ripe raspberries. Such a wealth of berries as two little berry pickers had never found before. Lisa picked, Aina picked, Lisa ate, Aina ate, and in a little while their baskets were full. "Now we shall go home," said Aina. "No, let us gather some more," said Lisa. So they put their baskets down on the ground and began to fill their pinafores, and it was not long before the pinafores were full too. Wow, 2 Spanbots in a row. "Now we shall go home," said Lisa. "Yes, we shall go home," said Aina. Both girls took a basket in one hand and held up their apron in the other, and then turned to go home. But that was easier said than done. They had never been so far in the great wood before, and they could not find any path or road, and soon the girls noticed that they had lost their way. The worst of it was the shadows of the trees were becoming so long in the evening sunlight. The birds were beginning to fly home, and the day was closing in. At last the sun went down between the pine tops, and it was cool, dusky in the great wood. The girls became anxious, but went steadily on, expecting that the wood would end soon, and that they would see the smoke from the chimneys of their house. After they had wandered for a long time, it began to grow dark. At last they reached a great plain overgrown with bushes. When they looked about them, they saw, as much as they could, the darkness, but they were in the same beautiful raspberry bushes from which they had picked their baskets and full their aprons. Then they were so tired that they sat down on a stone and began to cry. "I'm so hungry," said Lisa. "Yes," said Aina. "If only we had 2 good meat sandwiches just now." And she said that she felt something in her hand, and when she looked down, she saw a large sandwich of bread and chicken. And at the same time, Lisa said, "How queer, I have a sandwich in my hand." "And I too," said Aina. "Will you dare to eat it?" "Of course I will," said Lisa. "If only we had a good glass of milk just now." And as she said that, she felt a large glass of milk between her fingers, and at the same time Aina cried out, "Lisa, Lisa, I have a glass of milk in my hand. Isn't this queer?" The girls, however, were very hungry, so they ate and drank with a good appetite. When they had finished, Aina yawned and stretched out her arms and said, "Oh, if only we had a nice soft bed to sleep on now." Scarcely had she spoken before she felt a nice soft bed by her side, and there beside Lisa was one too. These seemed to the girls more and more wonderful, but tired and sleepy as they were, they thought no more about it and crept into the little beds, drew coverlets over their heads, and were soon asleep. When they woke, the sun was high in the heavens. The wood was beautiful in the summer morning, and the birds were flying about in the branches and the treetops. It's springtail. At first the girls were filled with wonder when they saw that they had slept in the wood among the raspberry bushes. They looked at each other, and they looked at their beds, which were the finest flax covered over the leaves and moss. At last Lucy said, "Are you awake, Aina?" "Yes," said Aina. "But I'm still dreaming," said Lisa. "No," said Aina. "But there's certainly some good fairy living among the raspberry bushes. If only we had a hot cup of coffee now, and a nice piece of white bread to dip into it." Scarcely had she finished speaking when she saw beside her a little silver tray with a gilt coffee pot, 2 cups of rare porcelain, and a sugar basin of fine crystal. silver sugar tongs, and some fresh white bread. The girls poured out the coffee and put in their cream and sugar and tasted it. Never in their lives had they tasted such beautiful coffee. I should like to know very much who's given us all this, said Lisa. I have my little girls, said a voice just then from the bushes. The children looked around wonderingly and saw a kind-looking little old man in a white coat and red hat, limping out from among the bushes, though he was lame in the left foot. Neither Lisa nor Anna could utter a word. They were so filled with surprise. Don't be afraid, little girls, he said, smiling kindly at them, and he could not laugh properly because his mouth was crooked. Welcome to my kingdom. You have slept well and eaten well and drunk well? He asked. Yes, indeed we have, said both girls. But tell us. And they wanted to ask who the old man was, but were afraid to. I will tell you who I am, said the old man. I am the Raspberry King, who reigns over this kingdom of raspberry bushes, and I have lived here for more than 1,000 years. But the Great Spirit who rules over the woods and sea and the sky did not want me to become proud of my royal power in my long life. Therefore he decreed that one day in every 100 years I should change into a little raspberry worm and live in that weak and helpless form until sunrise the next sunset. From sunrise till sunset. During that time my life is dependent on the little worm's life, so that a bird can eat me, a child can pick me up with the berries and trample underfoot my 1,000 years of life. Now yesterday was just my transformation day, and I was taken with a raspberry and would have been trampled to death if you had not saved my life. Till sunset I lay helpless in the grass, and when I was swept away on from your table, I twisted one of my feet, and my mouth came crooked with terror. But when evening came, I could take my own form again. I looked for you to thank you and reward you. Then I found both of you here in my kingdom, and tried to meet both of you as well as without frightening you. Now I will send the bird from my wood to show you the way home. Goodbye, little children, and thank you for your kind hearts. The Raspberry King can show he is not ungrateful. The children shook hands with the old man and thanked him, feeling very glad that they had saved the little raspberry worm. They were just going when the old man turned around and smiled mischievously with his crooked mouth, and said, Greetings to Otto from me, and tell him when I meet him again, I shall do him the honor of eating him up. Oh, please don't do that, cried both girls, very frightened. Well, for your sake I will forgive him, said the old man. I am not revengeful. Greetings to Otto, and tell him that he may expect a gift from me, too. Goodbye. The two girls, light of hearts, now took their berries and ran off through the woods after the bird, and soon it began to get lighter in the wood, and they wondered how they could have lost their way yesterday. It seemed so easy and so plain now. One can imagine what joy there was when the two reached home. Everyone had been looking for them, and the big sister had not been able to sleep, for she thought the wolves had eaten them up. Stereotype. Otto met them. He had a basket in his hand and said, Look, here's something that an old man just left for you. When the girls looked into the basket, they saw a pair of the most beautiful bracelets of precious stones, dark red and made in the shape of a ripe strawberry, with an inscription, To Lisa and Anna. Beside them, and there was a diamond breastpin in the shape of a raspberry worm, on which was inscribed, Otto, never destroy the helpless. Otto felt rather ashamed. He quite understood what it meant, but he thought that the old man's revenge was a noble one. The Raspberry King had also remembered the big sister, for when she sat in the table for dinner, she found 11 big baskets of the most beautiful raspberries, and no one knew how they had come there, but everyone guessed. And there was so much jam making it had never been before. And if you'd like to go and help in, they might perhaps get a little, for they will surely be making jam up to this very day. Huzzah. Okay. Ads will probably start sooner than later. Can't believe 2 bots in a row. And they were both using the exact same diction. That's just ridiculous. Redunculous. So very redunculous. Anyway, who's on that we might raid? Anyone in here lurking other channels right now? See if anyone's on. I've been trying to limit my stalking while streaming. Oh, took that long for the music to stay on. Oh, figures. Let's see. I see 4 friends playing games right now. Dusk is doing Walking Dead. Chiva is doing Elden Ring. Yuki is doing Repo. Let's scare wastes. If it's at least possible. Raid messages have been posted. Yep, the ads start in 10 minutes, so we've got good time. So, I will... No, we're going to raid him playing Baldur's Gate, so we'll see hopefully everyone Monday when I'm doing Baldur's Gate with crowd control. Till then, I hope you all have a good night and a wonderful weekend. Ta-ta.
In the hollow of the night, shadows weave and twist. The wolf has told his stories, wrapped in mystic mist, lurking in the silence where the echoes softly play. The echoes of forgotten tales, dimming as they sway. The hours drip like candle wax, slowly melting gold. Lands of frost and twilight, secrets yet untold. The forest breathes a shiver, its ancient heartbeats thrum. Underneath the silver glow, the wild whispers come. Time to close the book, let the pages fall. You've roamed the winding paths, now heed the twilight call. The moon is setting low, a guardian